What is the greatest unsolved mystery of all time? DB Cooper. Dude steals money off a government plane. Asks for a parachute. Jumps from the plane never to be seen again. Ducking legend. It was just a passenger plane actually. He hijacked it. Forced it to land and asked for parachutes and money, which he was given. Allowed off all the passengers and gave the pilots a perfectly plotted flight route to follow at low altitude, where he jumped out somewhere over a forest. The DC-9 had a unique door where the tail cone opens outwards, ideal for jumping out of. Never found the guy, which a newspaper erroneously identified as DB Cooper. His real name isn't known, but they did find some of the money they gave to him washed up on the banks of a river nearby around 30 years later. Most experts are of the opinion that he likely died at some point early on in his little adventure. But still no evidence has been found. He was considered quite a nice bloke as hijackers go. Not causing harm to anyone, and seemed to have quite some knowledge of the DC-9 and more than likely an ex-paratrooper. Probably working within the aviation industry. Quite an interesting mystery by all accounts. A mystery that really intrigues me is the Indus Valley Civilization. They were large, well-planned cities on the banks of the river Indus. They had an advanced sanitation system and their people were great designers, builders. Eventually the people started to abandon the cities, or maybe they perished. The cities were excavated years later by archaeologists. No one has been able to exactly pinpoint the cause of the destruction of the cities. There are multiple theories though. They had an entire script that no one has been able to translate. The archaeologists have unearthed idols, buildings, utensils, money, coins. It's just interesting how they just ceased to exist for so many years. Edit. Redditors who are saying that Indus Valley Civilization is from Pakistan. Please note that it was a group of cities. While the major cities, Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, are in Pakistan. India does have some of the smaller cities like Dhalavira and Rakhigarhi. Also, thanks for my highest voted comment ever. Where does the voice in your head that you used to think inward come from? Is the voice the real you? Would a person who never heard a language be conscious in the same way you think of yourself as conscious? If the word voice in our heads is our consciousness, do the subtleties and variations between languages imply different types of consciousness? When you talk, think who is the listener. I'm not high enough for that comment. My most recent favorite. If the Great Sphinx is only about 4,500 years old, then why does it show weather inconsistent with the much wetter climate in the region 10k plus years ago? Maybe the Egyptians decided just to thoroughly wash it once a year. I imagine a bunch of Egyptians in bikinis and pharaoh headdresses doing like a sexy car wash thing with the Sphinx. The Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, Boston. Theft of 13 oil paintings worth $500 million. The 18th of March, 1990, still unsolved. SUEDU. They are sitting in the private collection of some rich guy. Mystery solved. What was here before the universe began 13 billion years ago? If we're going with the Big Bang model, this question is nonsensical because there was no before. Time started with the universe itself. The contents of the library at Alexandria. Unfortunately, that's unsolvable. What if we get a time machine? Steal it all. Burn it down to cover our tracks. And bring it back with us. That went wrong the first time. Why my wife has stayed with me for 34 years. IMO, the Battle of Los Angeles. Long story short, an object was spotted hovering slowly over LA during WWII. The entire Los Angeles anti-aircraft battery engaged it for like an hour, thinking it was a Japanese aircraft but couldn't damage it. Then after a while it just disappeared as suddenly as it had appeared. It is funny to think that if that was a UFO, that we scared them. What an impression to leave. They are just hovering and watching. Thinking, what the hell are they doing? Tiny eating sounds. If the universe is constantly expanding, then what is at the edge of space? There must be a finite end at any given second as it expands. So what is it expanding into? What is outside of space as we know it? I've been wondering this for years. Voiced it once. and was told I was an idiot because space is the outside of space. I don't think they understood my question. Or perhaps I phrased it poorly. It's not expanding into anything. The space between things is getting bigger. There's not really any way to understand it except mathematically. There's nothing else in our experience that does the same thing. Honestly, that explanation helps me understand better than what I was picturing. Instead of a black sphere growing infinitely, I'm now imagining galaxies just drifting farther apart. A couple of nights ago some rustlers stole approximately 1,500 geese from a farm. They managed to do it without getting caught and without any of the geese making a noise. They also had to presumably drive some lorries up big enough to take them all, but nobody saw or heard anything. Where did they go? How did they do it? Where do the socks go? In my house. They shapeshift into wire hangers. Lori Erica Ruff's real identity. Long story short. After this Texas woman committed suicide, her ex-husband and children found this box with all sorts of weird papers and stuff, basically proving that she wasn't who she said she was. Turns out nobody has figured out who she actually was. There are guesses as to where she came from, but no one knows for sure. I was going to say the disappearance of Amelia Earhart, but apparently they realized they might have actually found her remains like 76 years ago. Google.com. Earhart was clearly whisked away to the Delta Quadrant by aliens as shown in the first show of season 2 on Star Trek Voyager, the 37s. Doesn't anyone pay attention to history anymore? The case of the missing Bowman children. It happened in my state of Australia in 1966 on Australia Day, the 26th of January. A mother allowed her 3 children aged 9, 7 and 4 to catch the bus to the local beach for the afternoon, provided they were home by about 3 p.m. Apparently the oldest, Jane, was quite responsible and it was normal to allow children to do things like that back then. The mother gave them some shillings and pence. This was when Australia still used British, but not a £1 note. The children got there successfully and were seen playing with a surfer-looking man on the grassy knoll near the beach and later went off with him. They were seen by a few people, the man and the deli that they stopped to buy pies and pasties at, with a £1 note. This is why it was important to say that they weren't give a £1 note, and by the local postman who they called out and waved to. After that they simply vanished. Nothing of them has ever been found. Their bodies, their clothing, no beach towels, not even the paperback copy of Little Women that Jane had on her has ever been found. Essentially they disappeared off the face of the earth. It's often described as the day Adelaide, the city, lost its innocence. What makes the mystery even more freaky is that in 1973, 7 years later, there was another frightening and mysterious disappearances of children. This time 2 young girls, previously unknown to each other, Tracy Gordon, 4 and Joan Ratcliffe, 11, went missing from a state football match. They were seen with a man briefly before they vanished, who eerily matched the description of the man seen with the Bowman children 7 years earlier. Much like the Bowmans, the bodies of those children nor anything from on their person has ever been found. There are theories on both cases, but the most prevalent and mostly accepted as truth, though no one can be sure as both cases are completely unsolved, is that the assumed murders, along with a few other murders and disappearances of children that occurred interstate, were committed by the same man. Many believe there was a serial killer of children who was never caught and for many years was wandering around abducting and murdering children right under the nose of the public, as the Bowmans and the 2 girls were in highly public places. TLDR, there was possibly a child serial killer in Australia in the 1960s and 70s who has never been caught. Disappearances of the Malaysian flights. They don't have any flight data. It went offline and poof, whole plane vanishes. And one day all the media just stopped covering it. Weirdest moment of my life. Everyone just stopped talking about it like it never existed. That's called losing interest. After the networks already talked it to death, nobody cared anymore. So they stopped covering it. Was there a second gunman on the 22nd of November, 1963? Also, is Air Day with SpongeBob SquarePants lost forever? Or Was JFK not Oswald's intended target? Don't have a source handy, but read speculation he may have been aiming for the governor in the car. Gov. Connolly was previously Secretary of the Navy, and allegedly Oswald wrote him a letter asking him to look into his discharge. Oswald, who the KGB claimed was too unstable to work with, became enraged from the perceived slight of Connolly ignoring him and wanted to kill him. Hard to reconcile the fact that one has the President of the United States in your crosshairs but this person wants to kill someone else. But you always hear about how impossible fantastical the shot was. So maybe Oswald missed? Where I got my height from. Dad is 5 feet 8 inches and mom 5 feet 5 inches. I'm over 6. No one else in family is over 5 minutes and 10 seconds. Who's my real father? How tall is your milkman? What is this? The 60s? The Bowman children. A missing kids case that has intrigued me for years. Wikipedia.org. This is beyond tragic. The parents are still alive. 88 and 90 years old. What a truly awful way to live 50 years. I'm amazed neither died sooner of heartbreak. F it. This will be buried. But here are some of my favorites from back in the day that were ruined by logic. D.B. Cooper. He very likely died in the woods that night. Lost Roanoke Colony. There were years between when they were last seen and more years before any investigation took place. And keep in mind the word the English found carved was the name of a nearby island. And they didn't go look. They went back to England, an already struggling colony left on its own for all those winters. Not too mysterious. Edit, and the colonists had a signal to communicate if they were forcibly removed. Carve a cross. But instead they carved the name of the island where they probably moved to. But no one looked there for years. Dyatlov Pass. Avalanche, paradoxical undressing, scavenger critters, and either the radiation was a tabloid fabrication or cross-contamination. Who'da thunk 1950s Soviet Union CSI wasn't up to snuff? Jack the Ripper. My favorite theory is a German sailor who was executed in the US for a very similar crime. He told his lawyer he had a fundamental hatred of women and couldn't stop himself from killing. The boat he was frequently crewed to was docked in London at the time of the killings. However, the records for the time in question are missing, so we can't confirm he was in London. Damn. Zodiac. I thought we settled on Ted Cruz. Can't believe how far I scrolled and nobody mentioned the Roanoke lost colony. A whole colony just up and disappears. Funny how the nearby Indian tribe suddenly gained loads of light-skinned members and mixed children. Even though this lacks a serious tag, I'm going to post a serious answer. Though there's no proof it ever even happened. Spring-heeled Jack. It's pretty widely considered an old Victorian-era urban legend at this point. And some kind of sensational boogeyman story. The first attacks, allegedly, took place in Lavender Hill where your typically rappy Gropperson MO played out. Except that Mr. Gropperson, allegedly, leapt straight over a carriage and then over a 9-foot wall before disappearing. Some accounts say that he spat blue flames and had glowing red eyes and all kinds of other crazy monster traits, but those are widely acknowledged to be fanciful imaginings. It was serious enough at the time that the Mayor of London was willing to at least partially acknowledge the goings-on, admitting the attacks had happened. But not that Gropperson McCreepy was any kind of literal monster, and the Duke of Wellington took to patrolling his neighborhood at night to protect young women. The character seeped into the public consciousness and had starring roles in Penny Dreadfuls and Punch and Judy puppet shows for decades. If even half the stories are to be believed. He traveled all over the country scaring the willies out of women and children, pestering security guards, kicking dogs, and generally being a right bastard and a nuisance in 1837 until the last reported sighting in 1904. Here are some artists, Wikimedia org renderings. And if you're incredibly fortunate you might be able to dig up some of the Times articles on the attacks as well. Edit, typo. My favorite is the Dyatlov Pass incident. A group of experienced skiers in the Ural Mountains all died. Presumably from hypothermia. They suffered physical trauma of some unknown strong force. which many believed to be an avalanche. But evidence could not prove an avalanche even occurred. Their tent had been ripped open from the inside. Their bodies were highly radioactive. One member of the group had her tongue cut out, and others shows internal damage without evidence of external damage. There was also no indication of anyone else being there, which would suggest an attack. I should probably share the mystery of the Egyptian granite cylinder. In Abousi, former part of the antique Egyptian Empire, archaeologists have found a strange hole near a granite door. It's cylinder shaped, and the corresponding granite cylinder have been found nearby. Nothing unusual or exciting, you'll say. Now, the interesting detail about this cylinder is that there is a perfect spiral all along its surface. The spiral matches perfectly the spiral that can be seen inside the hole. Therefore, we can assume this mark results from the way the cylinder was carved from the stone. Why is it a mystery? Because granite is a very ducking hard stone. Even with nowadays technologies, carving such a regular piece with that kind of accuracy is difficult and cannot be done by a regular tool. By the time this cylinder was carved, Egyptians had little knowledge of metals, mostly using copper, which is not as hard as granite. That means a copper tool would be destroyed before even scratching the stone. Even with diamond head, with a mechanical tool, it would have taken the ages for a simple cylinder. And this accuracy is absolutely unreachable with said tool. All scientists tried to figure out a way Egyptians dug into granite with that much accuracy, but no one has succeeded. From everything we know about Egyptians, they were ducking and able to do so. Lots of theories about that, aliens, former civilization, but absolutely no answer. More details, hidden in kitters.com. Edit, link. The guys that escaped from Alcatraz. I like to think they survived and lived a good life. Devil's Kettle in Minnesota is a place where a stream splits. Half goes down a waterfall, and half goes into the kettle. No one knows where it goes, but it is said that some people once put a car down it. It never came out. Also, scientists put dye in the water, but to no avail. Cicada 3301. Google that sheet. I'm too scared itless since it's 2 AM and the lights are off. PLS, some kind person tell me what that is. Doesn't seem too scary tbh. According to Wikipedia, Cicada 3301 is a name given to an enigmatic organization that on 6 occasions has posted a set of complex puzzles and alternate reality games to recruit codebreakers from the public. Some seem to believe it to be a cult. Others think that it has to do with recruitment for highly intelligent individuals toward top organizations. IDK. I just ran it down real quick. Seems that the puzzles require physical movement out of the person trying to solve it by hitting up different cities and locations though.